There is another question mark in all of this, and it still falls down over Max Verstappen and the question that we've had now for the last year and a half of his future at the team. They're not listening to Max in how difficult this car is to drive. They're not bringing the changes that he needs and he wants in this car for it to become more drivable. And now they're just, playing fast and loose with his teammate. He needs stability in that second seat.
Yeah.
And he sees the importance of that. And he knows the quality of the drivers that he has alongside him and that he's had alongside him. How long can they go not listening to Max until he just throws his hands up in the air and says, well, this, I'm done, because I can't keep talking into an echo chamber. This is ridiculous.
Do you think Max will? Back to the Fast and the Curious, the Formula One podcast that takes you inside this mad world of Formula One.
We say that again.
Biggest name, yeah, I know. You can speak to the biggest names in the sport. We preview and debrief the races, and most importantly, and what we're doing today, is we react to all of the breaking news. This is our first emergency episode of the year. Christian, give me a klaxon.
It's more of a siren, and for that I'd like to apologise. I couldn't do it. I genuinely panicked when he said give me a klaxon. I was like, oh, I don't think I can. Anyway, yes, hello, I'm Christian Hewgill, and it is finally official. Yuki Tsunoda will replace Liam Lawson at Red Bull from the Japanese Grand Prix onwards in one of the most brutal driver moves in Formula One history. Red Bull have dropped Liam Lawson after just 2 Grand Prix. 2 of them.
Just
two. In the next half an hour or so, we will talk you through what on earth is going on, won't we, Betty Glover?
Yeah, we're going to try and make sense of this as best as we can. It is just me, Betty, and Christian. Me, Betty, and me, Christian.
And you, Christian.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Greg James can't be here because he's working. Talk about timing, Red Bull. Come on, for God's sake. But we've drafted in one of our absolute faves, Formula One broadcasting legend, Will Buxton. Will, welcome back.
Thanks. What a day. I can't believe it's taken until March, nearly the end of March, for an emergency podcast. But what a topic. What a day.
Although, Will, I didn't think that the emergency episode in March, famously the month the Formula One season starts, would be a driver change. We're getting into football manager territory when we're in September and they go, here we go, first second of the season, it's only September, we've only played 20 minutes. Formula One is that sport now. Here we are.
Yeah, this feels wild even on Red Bull terms. This is crazy.
Do you know what? Red Bull feel more carnage than Manchester United, and that says a lot.
That says a lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
It really does say a lot. We've all got a lot that we want to say, and we're going to get into it in a moment. But before we do, we've been waiting a very long time for this confirmation to drop. There's been reports left, right and centre. We all knew that this change was going to happen. It finally has been confirmed today. Christian, give us the rundown.
Well, after a second very bad weekend in a row for Liam in China at the weekend, numerous very well-respected F1 journalists started to talk about Red Bull making this decision and that Red Bull had made this decision on Monday. By Tuesday, it started leaking out and being reported. By Wednesday, the world and his wife knew. Everyone was talking about it.
This sounds like a Craig David song.
Yes. Horner made the decision on Monday. Anyway.
He took me for a drink on Tuesday.
Careful. Anyway, and on Thursday, Red Bull confirmed the decision.
Which means on Friday, Saturday and Sunday we can chill.
Yeah, leaving us a weekend off, Will. Quite. Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to read Christian Horner's statement in full because I just think it's interesting, right? So this is the statement in full. It's been difficult to see Liam struggle with the RB21 at the first 2 races, and as a result, we've collectively taken the decision to make an early switch. We came into the 2025 season with 2 ambitions: to retain the World Drivers' Championship and to reclaim the Constructors' title, and this is purely a sporting decision. We acknowledge there was a lot of work to be done with the RB21, and Yuki's experience will prove highly beneficial in helping to develop the current car. We welcome him to the team and look forward to seeing him behind the wheel. We have a duty of care to protect and develop Liam. And together, we see that after such a difficult start, it makes sense to act quickly so Liam can gain experience as he continues his F1 career with Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, an environment and a team he knows very well. Betty, what's your reaction to this? We always start with me. What do you think?
Well, what do I think? I think when you listen to that statement, it sort of feels like it's a bit of a duty of care scenario. Maybe it's a little bit of a mental health thing, but which I get, fine, fair enough. I just think the whole thing is just extraordinary decision making. From a management perspective and a people perspective, it feels absolutely baffling. They could have picked Yuki to replace Perez anyway. But instead they went for Lawson, a rookie, because they clearly saw something in him, in him from a mental strength perspective or whatever it was. They thought he could do it. Yet they're now changing their mind after just 2 races on tracks that he hadn't even raced on, with minimal preparation in the car.
And really tricky conditions in Melbourne.
Tricky conditions. How do they even justify this? I just do not understand. And also the fact that bloody second Red Bull seat, every driver, they try and they fail to perform in that seat alongside Verstappen. They get spat out by this brutal Red Bull system. It's becoming so evident that just something needs to change.
Will, what was your initial reaction when you saw it?
Shocked that it's happened this quickly. Not necessarily surprised, but even for Red Bull, it's extreme. I think the duty of care line is laughable, and it's almost gaslighting that we're doing this for Liam's own good. You're not. You're doing it for your own good. You know, the only duty of care that's being held there is towards Christian and Helmut's position leading that team. It's panic stations and hit the big shiny destruct button. Look, I guess part of this comes because they persisted with Checo and because they persisted with Daniel last season when the data suggested that neither were right for those seats at the time. And it's ironic because, Liam was probably the best candidate for the V-carb seat, whatever we were calling it at the time in 23, but they picked De Vries. He was the best candidate in 24, but they put Daniel in. Even if you'd put Daniel in place of Checo halfway through 24 and got Daniel to try that car out, and Daniel had turned around and said, this car's terrible, and you'd given Liam half a season to get up to speed, would that have made life easier for them?
Certainly seems more logical given his experience, doesn't it?
But because they stuck with them and then realised the error of their ways, they're now in this position of saying, well, we can't do that again. So it's kind of understandable to a degree, but 2 races is insane. And it's particularly insane when you recognise that part of their reasoning for putting Liam in that car, if you weighed up Yuki and Liam against each other last year, Yuki came out just, slightly on top. But their reasoning was Liam is the long-term prospect for us, right? We believe that long-term, Liam is the better option. And yet this decision is pure short-termism. There's nothing long-term in it, other than dropping him down and killing essentially, not necessarily killing his career, but his confidence, his mindset. You're going to break him by doing this. I don't get it.
Christian, we know that this isn't new with Red Bull. So they have a long history of dropping their drivers, Gasly, Albon, Perez, and they all leave and their confidence is destroyed and they've got to rebuild themselves. They ditched Daniel Ricciardo to bring in Liam last season. This has shocked everybody. Simple question for you then. Did Liam deserve it?
No, not at all. Listen, in Liam's wildest dreams, he wouldn't have expected it to go as badly as it did. In Red Bull's wildest dreams, they wouldn't have expected it to go as badly as it did. But let's break down these 2 Grand Prix weekends. And yes, there's lots of different sessions in Grand Prix weekends, but still, it is 2 Grand Prix weekends. And where it matters is qualifying in the race. Australia, awful qualifying for Liam, obviously, an unbelievably difficult race in terms of the changing weather conditions on a street circuit. We saw the number of experienced drivers who made mistakes. And yes, China wasn't good either. but I couldn't understand, how many opportunities they gave Checo, and we speculated at the time, well, it must be for commercial reasons, because they gave him every chance, almost like they were trying to sort of go the opposite to what they'd done before, Betty, with those drivers you listed. But then it's like, and then they gave Checo that new contract, thinking, well, that will settle him. I see the logic, but it was never going to happen. It was too far gone. And it's like then they've gone way the other way and gone, oh, well, we learned from that mistake. But neither are right. Checo was elongated to the extent it was painful. And this is it is by anyone's standard too quick. Maybe. And I said this in one of the pods we'd done, Betty, but I'm looking at the calendar next to me. So we've got Japan next, then Bahrain, Saudi. And I'm thinking, I thought I was having a controversial opinion here by going, maybe if it's bad in Bahrain and Saudi, they might look to replace him for Miami. And I thought, I'm going to get some stick for that being too soon there. And they've replaced him now. So I think it's extraordinary. I think it's absolutely extraordinary. And no, I can't possibly think he deserves it. I think, yes, it wasn't good. Of course, it wasn't good. It needed to be so much better. But he needed a bit more time, surely, by anyone's standards.
Will, we know that Formula One is a cutthroat sport. It's a pressure cooker. Do you think this is up there as one of the most ruthless decisions in the sport's history?
Yeah, unquestionably. And it's a mess of their own making. It just feels like inept decision making at every single turn here, whether that's the scenario that they placed themselves in last year, the scenario that they placed themselves in this year. If going back to the argument of it, they wanted Liam on the long term. Well, if you thought you wanted him long term, but he wasn't quite ready, then put him in the B team and put Yuki into the main team for half a season until Liam's ready. Yeah. Why throw him into the viper's nest if he isn't
what are you expecting?
Prepared for it? Yeah, what are you expecting? Look, the responsibility here is not Liam's. He's got the seat, yes, okay, and he's got to make the most of it. But the decision to put him there is Christian and Helmut's. They're the ones responsible for this, and they're the ones responsible for having this massive shock of a U-turn after 2 races. Liam's been better than decent in everything that he's ever contested. In his junior formula, he won the first weekend in every single championship he ever raced in. That's not going to be doable in Formula One, but what that shows is that he's adaptable. He can change and shift and will be competitive in every single thing that you put him in. So for me, it's not that Liam isn't adaptable. There's clearly something more at play here, and we've seen it for years. But the fact that you have today a number of people posting and saying how much they feel for Liam, and Max Verstappen is liking these posts, and Max didn't really want Liam to go, but could see the benefit of Liam stepping down.
I didn't know that.
Well, let me give you the one example of this, because I was going to bring this up. So Guido van der Garde is an ex-Formula One driver. He wrote, I'm getting a bit tired of all the comments that F1's the toughest sport in terms of performances. And when you undeliver, you got to face the consequences. Yes, you got to perform. Yes, the pressure's insane. But in my opinion, and bear in mind how strong this is, in my opinion, this comes close to bullying or a panic move that's a panic move than actual high athlete achievements. And this has been liked by Max Verstappen.
But I think it's because Max knows that this car isn't where it needs to be, right? And Max, we've known for a long time now, is pulling superhuman things out of this car. If the decision is let's not look at the car, but let's just keep focusing on the number 2 seat and trying to get somebody in who can do the impossible like Max does, then you're still just papering over the cracks. And Checo had said it was the car. Max said it was the car last year. Everybody said that the car wasn't where it needed to be. Did Checo do a good enough job last year? No, he didn't. But could anybody be doing what Max is doing in the car this year? And it's almost like Red Bull are going to stick everybody in that car that they can until they reach their limit, until they figure it out. Because what do they do now? What if Yuki qualifies 20th in this car? What are they going to do? Send him back to Racing Bulls, or just get rid of him completely? And then what? You bring in Isaac Hadjar as your fourth and
don't
last
do that
driver?
to Isaac Hadjar. I'm not going to have that.
Or what do you do? Do you give
going to step in?
Do you give Lindblad the super license and kill his career at the same? What are you going to do? You're just going to keep marching through drivers until you've killed every single one of their careers? Until you take a long, hard look in the mirror and realize, you know what? There's a common denominator here, because these are all excellent drivers who go on to have excellent careers once they leave this hell of, sort of hellfire situation that we've put them in. What maybe the problem isn't them.
The thing that I thought was really interesting, what you said earlier about how, the whole doing it as a sort of duty of care scenario and how that comes across as quite gaslighty. I agree with it. And also what makes me feel really uncomfortable is that after Australia, the first race of the season, when obviously Liam didn't do very well, and then after Shanghai, Christian Horner's coming out and he's saying, oh yeah, it's not ideal. We'll have to take a look. There is no public backing of him. He's not backing him in public at all. He's saying, yeah, this isn't ideal. We're going to take a look at it.
Really
and
good point.
you could tell. Imagine being Liam listening to that. Back your bloody driver.
Yeah,
He's a rookie. He's never raced on those tracks before.
It's race one. It's race one.
But also,
it's not like this has happened 7 or 8 races in, and then they're going,
Yeah.
we're going to have to look at it. It's not ideal. It's race one, and you've just made this decision.
But we know Formula One is cutthroat, and we know there are no second chances, and you have to perform. And when you jump in alongside the world champion, you need to try and get close. And qualifying P20 is not getting close to what Max is doing. But there's a real question mark here over what on earth they're looking for at Racing Bulls. What data points are they looking at that informs them that they're making the correct decisions, both to drop drivers and to promote drivers? Because it's not working. So either your data points are wrong, your analysis is wrong, or the two teams are now so vastly different in terms of what the demands of the car is, that it is utterly pointless promoting a driver from Racing Bulls to Red Bull, because they're not up to the challenge of driving that car. There is a tremendous disconnect here, and it's not, number one, it's not fair what they're doing with these drivers, but number two, there is an ineptitude here. There is a major downfall in this decision-making process, and someone has to start taking the fall for this, because
we'll get on to that. Yeah, I will. There's more to be said on that, Will, I think.
So, Christian, the question is, where does Liam go from here? Because we've been watching him. We know that he's so low on confidence. How does he rebuild himself? And can he do that in that new car?
I think there's a few things here. This will be a life-defining moment for Liam Lawson. He will remember this for the rest of his life. This will be a huge life significant moment forever for him. What he needs to do now is draw from Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon, who have managed to rebuild their careers in different ways. Pierre went back to AlphaTauri at the time, outraced Yuki to the point that Renault turned around and said, or Alpine turned around and said, you're our guy to take us into the future. Alex lost his seat and did a really good job and really enhanced his reputation as a Red Bull reserve driver. And Checo spoke very warmly of him, as well as did Max, and then got given the chance with Williams and is thriving. Has taken that and is even early days, but stacking well up against Carlos as well. Whether or not Liam would ever want to go back into this Red Bull seat, but regardless, I firmly believe that and I think there's every chance of this, if Liam can go, right, okay, I'm going to have to suck this one up. This is humiliating. This is going to be tricky. But all I'm going to do is keep quiet and go and race on the track and do well in RB. At some point, I believe there will be Formula One teams that need a driver that go, well, Liam Lawson's quick. We know Red Bull are bloody awful at managing drivers. Look, I don't know. We've got a new team coming in Cadillac. What happens if, Alpine need a new driver, McLaren need a new driver? If Liam Lawson goes and does a good job, his Formula One career can and will survive this. But we're going to see how tough he is mentally, because not everyone would be able to recover from this mentally, and that's going to be the challenge. He's, as Will said, he's got the capabilities. He's quick, but it's going to be such a mental test for him now.
It's whether he falls into the category of a Danny Kvyat or whether he falls into the category of a Pierre Gasly, and that's ultimately what will determine his future. But 2 races, like, that's enough to completely not just kill your confidence, but completely murder your career, because you're like, well, maybe I'm not good enough. But if imagine he takes it as, in the positive way that I think we all hope that he does. He comes back in the next Grand Prix and sticks that thing in the top 10, and Yuki doesn't make it out of Q1.
Yeah, can I just say, I think it's quite possible that he goes and gets into Q3 next Saturday.
Yeah. And
I think it's quite possible.
What do they do then?
I don't think Red Bull come out of this looking good in any scenario. Any scenario, they just look bad. Because if Yuki does really well in that car, they look bad because they should have gone for him in the first place. If Liam does really well in the RB, they look bad because they're like, well, what were we doing wrong with him in the... It just looks awful. Let's move on then and talk about Yuki Tsunoda, who's going to be replacing Liam. We heard earlier in Christian Horner's statement, Red Bull talking about his experience. He made his debut in 2021. He'll race in his 100th Grand Prix this year. But Will, we know Red Bull haven't wanted to put him in that seat in the past, have they? Was Yuki always the right call in the first place? Should he have got that seat instead of Liam?
I think it's a really difficult argument to make, because he has been impressive over the last 18 months. I think Yuki's been great. But Red Bull never saw him as a logical driver for them. It was never on their horizon.
Why?
And there was always the argument about his temperament, but I think more than anything, that's an easy excuse. More than anything, I think it was just his ceiling and the long-term capabilities that he had to reach the levels that they would expect their drivers to have. And in Yuki, they didn't see that. And so much of Yuki being there obviously was down to Honda's support, and well, certainly his duration there was down to Honda's support. The fact that they can, in the space of a couple of months, go from saying Yuki doesn't have what it takes to be in our top team and Liam is the long-term better option, to saying, oh, well, actually, we really need Yuki's help in developing this car. It's like, you can't have your cake and eat it, guys. It's like being spurned at the altar and then turning around to your ex-girlfriend and saying, you know what, I always liked you more. It's like, you can't... You can't...
It is.
But it's number one, it's not true. Number two, it's not believable in any way. And I feel for Yuki, because what happens now if he doesn't come up and perform? Because there's every chance that he doesn't. And I think Yuki's great. But I worry, because they will just spit him out. And it's not good from every single angle. This just isn't good, because you're ultimately just going to destroy careers when the focus is in completely the wrong place.
This takes us on nicely to a question, Christian, that we've got for you from Tom on Instagram. He says, if Yuki doesn't perform in that Red Bull, where do they go from there? How long does Yuki get in the seat? What happens if for the next couple of Grand Prix Yuki struggles as much as Liam did?
I was looking through the Fast and the Curious Instagram account yesterday, and the questions like Tom's were starting to come in. And this is my third season as being the person that answers questions on the podcast. And people like me and Will have done similar work in F1 of going, we're both presenters, but you answer questions, you know what I mean? And you do a bit of analysis. And I think this is the first time where I was reading through all these questions and going, don't know. Don't know. Because for the first time in the 3 years of doing this podcast, because Tom, I would like to answer your question with, I haven't the foggiest idea. Normally I can come up with, this is what I've heard in the paddock. This is what common sense would suggest. This is what history tells us in Formula One. There's always a way of answering a question in a circumstance like this. But as Will said earlier, this is unprecedented. And the reason I can't sit here and go, I tell you what they'll do, and I don't know, is because I'm not sure they do. I'm not sure they know. And the thing is, I think logically, the thing to have done would have been realised, you know what? we've always had a car that's hard to handle. That started to get worse last year. So let's look to Christian Horner spoke when they were looking to sign, when there was rumours about signing Checo Perez, and they went, we've promoted from within, but if you look in the past, we bought Mark Webber in, so we might do that and see who's on the market. And they did that with Sergio Perez. If you're being intelligent in your decision making, they should have looked back and gone, Karun Chandok said this on the podcast, we will get somebody more experienced. So if we don't, for all the things that Will said, we've got our doubts on Yuki. Liam's too inexperienced. Let's see if we can re-sign Alex Albon. He helped us get that car more manageable. Carlos Sainz is experienced on the market. All right, he didn't get on with Max a decade ago, but come on, guys, be grown-ups. But they didn't do that. They put Yuki in. So the answer to the question is, I have not a clue what they'll do if Yuki struggles as much as he did, because nobody does.
What would they have done if they'd signed Carlos or Alex? And they'd struggled in the same way that Liam was. Maybe not P20, but out in Q1 for the first 2 Grand Prix and struggling with the setup of the car. Do they, with this newfound intolerance for ineptitude, do they suddenly turn around and go, up 2 races, okay, we're moving you down to Racing Bulls and we're going to bring Yuki up after making the big play for a Carlos or an Alex? Would they have done that? Because this apparently is the new way that there are no second chances. And that's a really interesting one. You know, what do they do if after the next couple of races, Yuki is in the same position? Do they, as we were saying, bite the bullet and go for an Isaac or an Arvid? Do they suffer the ignominy, I can't talk today, of going cap in hand to Checo or Daniel and bringing them back for Miami? Or do they bring Liam back? What do they do? Give David Coulthard a call? Yeah, what's the option? What's the play here?
Will, sorry, can I ask you a question? Because, you know, Will, you've covered Formula One for many more years than me, and been asked questions about Formula One for many more years than me. There's me going to Tom's question. I don't know. Can you offer any more than that?
No, and I don't think they know.
No, well, that's it. Yeah.
Do you know the thing that I'd be worried about if I was Yuki? So Liam, at least it's not worst case scenario. Liam has still got a seat to go back to an RB, a team he knows really well. And that's fine. He's sort of got a second chance to redeem himself. If this doesn't work out for Yuki, where's he going to go?
Well, but Betty, we were talking about this the other day on text, weren't we? And Betty said to me on a WhatsApp message, well, if I'm Yuki, I'm not sure I want it. I think forget that. And I do understand that train of thought. But the problem is with Yuki, I don't think he's got anywhere else unless I think he's got to take this because he's just been sat sort of rotting in the B team with no hope of a promotion.
Well, and the contract's at an end at the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Honda are moving to Aston Martin, so they're not there anymore. So Yuki won't be in the Red Bull family after this year anyway. So he's got one chance to really make this work.
Unless he absolutely
blitzes
it. Yeah, and they go, oh my God, it's problem solved. Brilliant. We'll sign him up again.
Great. Well, he might.
He might. But but also, people have said, oh, well, will Honda take him to Aston? Yeah, but I don't see that happening personally. I think it might. Stranger things have happened. But I think this is Yuki's this is make or break for Yuki. It has to be. He's been waiting for this sort of chance.
But there is another question mark in all of this, and it still falls down over Max Verstappen and the question that we've had now for the last year and a half of his future at the team. You know, they're not listening to Max in how difficult this car is to drive. They're not bringing the changes that he needs and he wants in this car for it to become more drivable. And now they're just, playing fast and loose with his teammate. He needs stability in that second seat.
Yeah.
And he sees the importance of that. And he knows the quality of the drivers that he has alongside him and that he's had alongside him. How long can they go not listening to Max until he just throws his hands up in the air and says, well, this, I'm done, because I can't keep talking into an echo chamber. This is ridiculous.
Do you think Max will?
I think the more that this goes on, the more of the sort of pantomime villainy and ludicrous decisions that are made, he's going to question what he's doing there. If they're not listening to him and they're not bringing the changes on the car and their focus is somewhere entirely different, and you just need to look back 12 months. The whole reason that there were all these debates about, is Checo going to stay? Is Daniel going to get promoted? And the fight around that. So much of that was down to the politics that was emerging at Red Bull over who wanted to lead that team and who had the political sway at that time because of everything that was hanging over Christian and Helmut. It was all politics. That's why the decisions weren't made earlier. Liam was expecting that seat way earlier in the season, but it didn't happen because Helmut wanted him in, but Christian wanted to hold on to Daniel, and it was, it's just that place. It's got a very shiny veneer, but for 12 months or more, it's been a mess.
You mentioned earlier, Will, about Yuki's temperament and how that's been, a bit of a question mark around him for quite a while now. Do you think that is fair? And also, how do you think he's going to get on? Having interviewed him loads of times, him fairly well.
I don't think it's fair. I don't think you can read too much into drivers' radio messages. From radio messages, you'd assume that Max and GP have a terrible relationship, and they don't. So, drivers in the heat at the moment, they have a way of expressing themselves. And Yuki's a fighter. He's a battler. I love the way that Yuki goes racing. And I'm excited to see what he can do. And I wish him nothing but the best. And, you have to wish him luck to be stepping into that environment right now with the expectation, with the focus, stepping into your home Grand Prix with the backing of Honda and knowing that car that you're stepping into hasn't made it out of Q1. That's tough, particularly when we know that the Racing Bulls is an entirely different car to drive than this one. No preseason testing. You've got to have to relearn everything in that car, and you've got no time to do it. It's not an easy... And do you know what? It's half the reason that I was really impressed with Liam on the occasions when he stepped up into the Racing Bull V-Carb, whatever you want to call it,
Minardi.
Was Minardi. That's the one. Minardi. He came in mid-season, no testing, no training. That's not an easy thing to do. And then to show well, as he did in 23 and as he did in 24, incredibly difficult. But now Yuki gets in after 2 races of underperformance in that sister car with no testing, with no knowledge, at his home event where pressure will already be high. The cards are stacked against him. I just hope I really hope he does well. I'd love to see him get up there, out-qualify Max. I think it'd be wonderful. Is it going to happen? You got to be realistic.
Do you know what? I've been thinking about this though, and if you are an elite sports person in any sport, any situation, you're gonna fully back yourself. You're gonna go into it. And sorry to use another Man United reference. However, every single manager goes to United thinking they're going to be the one that's going to change that club. Ruben Amorim thought he would be the one that would turn things around. Yuki's going to have to believe that he can drive this car, and it's going to be so interesting to see whether he can or not. At Fast Curious Pod on all the socials, that is the place to send your questions to us anytime. We have had so many messages. Let's read some of them out. Nick Baxter says, another reaction. This is a stupid decision following the initial stupid decision. Lisa says it's going to be very interesting to see who scores more points in Japan. Will it be Yuki or will it be Liam? Keeley says, I don't agree with it at all. These were 2 circuits Liam had never even raced at. The guy needed time. Jacob says, let's ruin another up-and-coming driver. What happens when Liam outperforms Yuki now? Shona says they have done both drivers an absolute disservice and killed Liam's confidence. And David Hill says, can we admit Helmut Marko has been wrong for years now? And Christian, this is a point that you wanted to pick up on, isn't it?
Well, I just think we need to look back at the recent history of Red Bull Racing. We go back 2 seasons, and this is a team that were absolutely dominating. And we're sat there questioning when we'll ever see Red Bull not winning again. But even before that, they'd struggled with this second seat. Now, Betty, you just used a football analogy with Manchester United. And we always hear with football, with soccer, when teams are starting to sack managers over and over and over again, you start to question the chief executive, the decision makers, the board. So at what point now, how is Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, Christian Horner being the team principal, Helmut Marko being this elusive Lord Voldemort's-like figure who looms over the team and like the Grim Reaper of driver careers makes these decisions. How are they still in their jobs? Because what's happened in the last 18 months or so is they've gone from a position of dominance to a car that doesn't look like, without a generational talent in Max Verstappen, they would be able to get it into Q3 of qualifying. So many different people have left the team on the car design team, not least Adrian Newey, but there are others. The decision making on drivers is laughable.
Re-sign a driver on a multi-year deal mid-season, then pay to get him out of that deal at the end of the season, and the guy you replace him with, you've decided to replace after 2 races.
Exactly, Will. So how... I don't understand. Like, surely someone, shareholders at the top of Red Bull, at what point I can't understand how Helmut Marko and Christian Horner are still in their jobs. At what point does someone go, I'm sorry, what's happened? How are we being this badly mismanaged? I don't understand. I think this is the point now where someone at the very top of Red Bull needs to be asking serious questions about whether Christian Horner and Helmut Marko are the right people. Because the final nail in the Red Bull coffin would be what we were talking about earlier. Max going, hang on a minute, I put up with all the turmoil of the last year because you're giving me a dominant car. Well, now you're giving me a dog of a car. And I don't agree. He said he didn't agree with the decision to get rid of Liam Lawson. He said he would keep it in the last Grand Prix. He's been liking Instagram posts. So what happens when Max goes? What are you left with? I just think I think this is a disaster from a management perspective.
Oh, 100%. And also, maybe Christian Horner can take his own advice. If you've got a problem, change your car.
Change your effing team principle, I think.
Yeah. Do you agree, Will? Do you think Horner and Marko...
I think you guys have said it all. There's not a lot you can add on that. I mean, look, the success that they have wrought has been incredible. But if we bring the football analogy up, they're the ones who are looking short-term now. So you want short-termism, and you go on the basis of the last 18 months. Yeah, there needs to be some major question marks. Need to be some major questions answered when it comes to them. And, they have to take responsibility for this. Social media has been a funny place the last week, funnier than normal. It's been really disheartening to see the number of Perez fans taking aim directly at Liam Lawson over these last couple of weeks. I've caught a couple of stray bullets off that for daring to say, stick my head on a spike outside the Tower of London for daring to say that I thought Liam Lawson was a decent prospect given his junior career. How dare I? But the amount of flack and abuse that Liam Lawson has taken from a certain section of a fan base, it's not Liam's fault that he got that seat.
And he's a human being, guys. He's a human being.
And he didn't push Checo out of that seat. Checo pushed himself out of that seat, and Christian and Helmut pushed Checo out of that seat. Your anger is not with Liam, and your anger is not with the people who, watched Liam's career and thought, actually, this guy could be all right. Just it's. I don't like to see that because you're taking delight in someone else's downfall.
With certain sections of Formula One fan bases, and it's not just the Checo fan base, their fandom. Their support for the driver goes beyond logic. I was on the receiving end of some of that with Lando Norris fans last year of, daring to suggest Lando hadn't reached peak performance at a couple of points last year, which Lando was the first to agree with.
To admit, yeah.
And I got unbelievable stick. You do get the same with Sergio Perez. I'm sorry, can I make something quite clear? I've seen, justice for Checo. No, I'm sorry. Sergio Perez should still have been dropped from that seat. Sergio Perez's time in that seat was over. This does not change a thing there.
And he had been given quite a lot of time.
So much time.
Oh, so much time.
A whole lot of precious time.
So much time. But also, it's not Liam's fault.
Of course it's not.
It's not Liam's fault that Checo got biffed at the end of last year. Because the decision was still to be made as to who was going to replace him, You want someone to blame. Did Checo come up to the level that he should have done? No. Did he get enough time? Yes. But the decision makers in all of this are the ones which, ironically enough, and maybe now it will change, but the focal point has never been them. And now, as Christian and you, Betty, have said so eloquently, that finger of blame and the focus of the investigation has to go to the people at the top and the decisions that they are making.
So, I think we can all agree Japan is going to be very, very, very interesting. We've spoken a little bit about how we think Yuki might do. We've talked a little bit about whether sort of Liam can pick himself up. Christian, where do you think Liam goes from here?
I just think he's been quite punchy in some of his interviews he's done. And I understand that. He's not short of self-confidence, and you can't be as a racing driver. And also, Yuki this is something that was a bit underreported. Yuki was very plucky in his interviews as well, going, I should be in that seat. So Liam responded, and I think there's been more people picking up on the Liam being like that than Yuki was, but Yuki was doing it as well. I think what Liam needs to do now is just be quiet. And this isn't me saying, Liam needs to be quiet. This is me being just do as little talking as you can off the track. Just sort of almost cocoon yourself into the people you trust around you. Build a small little group of people you trust and just go and drive a racing car. It's easier said than done because this is going to be, as we've said, hugely difficult for him to get over mentally. But my thing would be go out in Friday free practice and have fun driving a car because you've got the natural talent, mate. You've got the speed. You've also probably gained a lot of fans from this. For all the people going, oh, Liam said this and Liam said that, there'll be a lot of well wishes for Liam out there now after this, from the Formula One world, from the fan group. Just go out and that RB looks good. Looks a decent little car.
Looks all right.
Score some points in that, mate. He needs to just take it as it comes, one session at a time, go out and do a good job. And as I said earlier, if he is able to do that, if he's able to move past this mental turmoil, there's still a career in Formula One for Liam Lawson. You mark my words.
Will, I know you've obviously covered Formula One for a very long time, and during that you will have done, a fair few interviews with Liam Lawson in the past sort of 2 seasons. You will have seen him sort of start coming through. He has this sort of reputation for being quite arrogant, doesn't he? But I feel like deep down he's actually just a really nice lad. From what I've heard from people that have spoken to him and done stuff with him. Do you think he's going to be able to pick himself up from this? And also, do you think that's a bit unfair for people to say that about his personality?
Yeah, I don't think he's arrogant. I think he's punchy. Yeah, but I don't think he's arrogant.
I agree. I think he's a nice guy.
He's a lovely guy. I remember, talking to him through the first half of last year, but just looking at how much he was kind of allowing himself not getting a seat in a drive to swirl inside his head, and sort of walking around the paddock and kicking his heels and just being like, am I ever going to get this chance? And you could see it starting to get in there. So I worry that he's going to let this get to him. But then as soon as he got in the car, he'd just get in and wring its neck and deliver to the best of his ability. So I hope he gets in that car and does what Christian suggests and, block the noise out. Don't talk too much. Just do your talking on the track. Imagine he gets up into the top 10 in qualifying. Be incredible. Who knows?
What a story.
Maybe Liam starts doing incredibly in the Racing Bulls. Goes and has a chat with Max, and by Miami, Max and Liam are at Racing Bulls because it's the better car.
Oh, can you imagine? Do you know what as well? This will make a great autobiography when he's older.
A good book.
Write a good book.
It's a good chapter.
It is.
It's a good chapter.
And Will, just very briefly, because now you've got to go and get a train, we obviously are seeing you having a lovely time covering IndyCar on a new adventure for you. How much are you loving your great American adventure?
I love it, mate. I absolutely adore it. It is it's great racing. It's an incredible paddock, brilliant drivers. Alex Palou, by the way, I think could jump into Formula One tomorrow and be exceptional. He is.
Well, there's an American team next year.
He's next level. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. But no, really enjoying it. I'm learning a lot about American culture. I had my first Arnold Palmer the other day, which is half lemonade, half iced tea. It's a game changer. Game changer.
You do look very tanned as well. You look very
Got a lovely
fresh
colour to you,
faced.
yeah.
Lovely colour.
That's the Californian sunshine. Yeah, it's not bad. Florida for the first race, California for the second, off to LA for the third. So, it's pretty good.
Later in the season, we'll have to get you back on and do a bit of IndyCar chat. But it's
Anytime,
a fantastic
mate.
racing series.
Anytime. Yeah, it is good.
I don't know anything about it, so I'd actually love to hear you talk about it.
If you're listening and watching us in the USA, Will's on Fox, and you can watch the coverage there. And then in the UK, it's on Sky Sports F1 as well, who you can hear Will in the commentary box as well. So if you want to go and learn about IndyCar, go follow Will there. And Will, we will speak to you later in the season about Formula One and about IndyCar as well. We love you, Will Buxton.
Can't wait, mate. Thank you. Bye, guys.
So, that is your lot. We'll be back to preview the Japanese Grand Prix next week, where we'll probably talk about this even more. Why not? I suppose it's massive. But we might also mention the other 18 drivers and 9 other teams too. If there's anything you want us to talk about next time, let us know on socials. We're Fast Curious Pod.
And making a second The Fast and the Curious appearance will be Will's fellow Drive to Survive breakout star. Ex-Haas team principal Gunter Steiner is coming back on, which we're very excited for. And whether you're listening or watching, make sure you hit subscribe or follow or like or whatever it is, because coming very soon, a current Formula One driver who's never been on the pod before making their debut. And we won't say who, just in case it doesn't happen. But it's all, they've said it will. It's like it's 95%. We're waiting just on an exact time. But yeah, new F1 driver coming on, which we always like, don't we, Betty?
I'm very excited about that. We will see you next week. Christian, any final words to sum up this episode?
I just think, just remember, we all have days, don't we, where we don't feel quite at it, where we maybe don't quite feel ourselves, where we maybe don't feel competent in life, where we maybe suffer from a bit of imposter syndrome. Well, if you're feeling like that today, remember it could be worse. You could be the person in charge of making driver decisions at Red Bull Racing. On that note, bye-bye now.
Bye.